Well, hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, and we have another chapter that we're going to be going through in Brandon Sanderson's The Way of Kings. And I do hope that this is an enjoyable thing. I'm excited to continue to walk through it, and some people have even mentioned the thought of potentially this even as a sort of book club. And I do hope that regardless of when people are reading through this series, I do hope that these videos can be a fun place to sort of share your thoughts, share your impressions, because again, we're reading through this as if we've never read it before. So I'm certainly highlighting things that I don't think I noticed on my first read through. However, I'm not going to give spoilers or anything. The goal is just to read through it, maybe to highlight some things that we should be looking for. However, I hope it'll be an enjoyable read through for you as we continue on. Well, we come to chapter 6, and this is an important chapter. Man, the intensity is going to increase throughout this chapter. The stakes are going to grow, and Kaldin himself, who's going to be the focus of this chapter, he is going to be put through some intense situations. The title of this chapter is Bridge 4, and again we have another brief inscription above before the chapter begins, and I'll read it for you. It reads, "I'm cold, mother, I'm cold. Mother, why can I still hear the rain? Will it stop?" And we read that this subject was a light-eyed female child, approximately 6 years old, collected 32 seconds pre-death. So again, we still have these, what seem to be last words before people expire. And we don't really know what they're there for. I'm sure that they're going to be important, but we just kind of keep reading through those and musing. And maybe you say to yourself, interesting, I have no idea. Well, I think that's pretty much most people, but we're going to keep going with them and see what this turns into. Well, Bridge 4, Chapter 6, the first sheet, and I'll show you the picture in the book here. You see an interesting map there. It's drawn. It's essentially the map of this camp that Kaldin is going to find himself in. Once Kaldin and the other slaves in that slave wagon arrive, they're kicked out of the wagon and they're essentially lined up. One thing that Kaldin begins to notice, though he knows that he is in the Shattered Plains, and this is where the king's army, made up of several high princes who all serve the king, he knows that this is where the army of the king is. And they are there to defend and to avenge the death of the previous king, King Gavilar. He's shocked that he notices the general unorderliness, the general disarray of the soldiers in this camp. And he asks himself, even thinking internally, are these really the king's troops? My goodness, they are unkept, they look dirty, they look not at all professional. Well, before he's able to murmur a little bit longer, a light-eyed woman approached, and she, it appears, is intending to purchase some of these slaves. She notices Kaldin, walks up to him specifically, and pays him some more attention. He looks much healthier. He looks much stronger than the other slaves. And as they even begin to dialogue back and forth, Kaldin tells her a lie. He tells her that he got the Shash brand, which means dangerous, on his forehead because in a drunken stupor he murdered a man. He tells her that because it would be better than what he was essentially arrested for and became a slave for, which was desertion. That's the marker. And even though Tvlakov, they had this agreement, Kaldin tries to take matters into his own hands and maybe even make his situation seem even better, even more desirable. And he says, this is what happened. However, I'm a good soldier. I made a poor decision, but if you will purchase me and let me become a soldier, I will do well in this army. Well, Tvlakov walks up and calls him in his lie and lets her know, no, he was arrested for desertion. And Kaldin is furious. After all that he's gone through on this journey, This man is going to ruin his only, he's still a slave, but he's going to ruin any chances. And he lashes out in anger at Tvlakv. The light-eyed woman sees it, and she realizes, okay, I'm glad I didn't buy whatever this slave was selling. Well, she does purchase pretty much the lot. She sends many of them over to what she calls forest duty, chopping down trees. And the rest, she tells some of the soldiers that are with her to take the remaining slave to what she calls the bridge cruise. She said specifically on page 99, tell Lamaril and Gaz that the tall one is to be given special treatment, meaning Kaldin. Well, he doesn't really know what that is, but they begin marching them over in one direction across the camp. And as the Kaldin and the other slaves who were supposedly in this bridge crew are deposited over to this man named Gaz, Kaldin notices the sergeant's branding on him, on his uniform. And so as they begin to talk, there's immediately a little bit of hostility between Kaldin and Gaz. Gaz hears that Kaldin was in a previous army and thinks he's just trying to get out of whatever they're about to get into. And so immediately they start sort of bickering back and forth when a loud horn sounds in the background and everyone jumps to work. Everybody jumps to attention. And before Kaldin knows it, Gaz has shouted at him and told him that he's in Bridge 4. Kaldin looks at a bunch of men all running in different directions and sees these massive wooden bridges begin to be marched forward by men underneath them carrying them. And he sees the bridge designations and sees Bridge 4. So he makes his way over there. Gaz is coming behind him, urging him quicker, quicker, quicker. And he walks upon this group of men who have been able to lift underneath, and this bridge with different spaces for men to stand underneath this massive wooden bridge, and they're able to carry it on their shoulders. You can read in the chapter how many men can fit under these bridges, but it's a good number. And I'm going to say around 50 from what I was just briefly looking through. And they're sort of lined up side by side, row by row, 8 people deep with about 5 or so across the width of the bridge. Well, Kaldin sees an open spot towards the back of the bridge, and he's put into that position by Gaz. So he sidles around people, steps underneath, and is holding this bridge. He can't see where he's going. Their heads sort of fit up underneath the wood that they're marching on with wooden bracers. So all Kaldin can feel is the weight of this incredibly heavy bridge, and he's looking at nothing more than wood bracers in front of him. And so without really knowing what's going on, he jumps under there, picks up this heavy bridge with these other men, and someone shouts, "March!" And they begin to march quickly. All he feels is the weight. He feels the wood digging down into his shoulders. The people beside him, he can sort of catch a glimpse, and he notices that they have sandals, they have vests that have padding under their shoulders, and he immediately figures out these men have done this before, and they know that anything that you can do to take the pain and the weight off of your back and your shoulders, Kaldin has none of that. He's barefoot. He has just a slight shirt over top of him, nothing that's going to protect from the weight and the pain of this bridge. However, they begin to march, and there's people huffing and puffing and breathing beside. An old man is actually right next to Kaldin, and he is just sort of saying things in order to try to distract his own mind, and lets him know that he's in for whatever's going to happen. And he makes a comment that though this is difficult, they're marching, they're marching, they're marching. They don't know where they're going. He makes the comment that this is nothing next to what happens when they arrive. But Kaldin doesn't even hear that. And so for hours and hours, they're marching. Kaldin can barely continue on when all of a sudden Gaz, the sergeant, he shouts, "Halt! drop, and when he does, the men on the outside, which is where Kaldin wishes he could be, because at least he could see something, they hold the bridge while the men underneath get out. They lower this massive bridge to the ground. Everybody runs behind and pushes, and they shove this bridge across a chasm. You'll notice that they're in a place that's called the Shattered Plains. And though we don't know anything about this area, we know that the shattered part are these massive chasms that are dug deep into the ground, some over 100 feet deep. If you were to fall into these chasms, you would certainly die. Well, they're shoving these bridges across the chasms where they are sort of narrow at the most narrow spot. And so they shove it, and all the men collapse on either side of this bridge while the thundering cavalry of the high prince comes behind them. The army, who's actually the army and soldiers, they march across this bridge that's just been placed there. The cavalry ride their horses across. And Kaldin thinks that this is it. He collapses in absolute exhaustion, knowing though, in previous times, when he's been in previous armies, for some reason, something doesn't sit right. Not just the pain, not just the anguish, but the fact that he's been thrown into this position, and he knows that this man, Gaz, the sergeant, he seems to be targeting him. Well, he can see Gaz off to the side. He's been shouting at them as they've been marching, as they've been struggling. And it's sort of, as we're going to find, a very Kaldin-esque way. In defiance, he's going to see Gaz, and he's going to sit up on the ground, look at him, begin massaging his arms, massaging his muscles, trying to find something that he can place on his shoulders to stop the wood from digging into his skin. But he's not going to let this sergeant win. Right? And so the old man who's next to him has also collapsed to the ground. He notices that Kaldin sits up. He's shocked. He thinks that this rookie certainly would be well exhausted, maybe even passing out from exhaustion. Well, in the midst of this, Kaldin sees not just a soldier, not just a light-eyes man. He looks up and sees marching across his bridge a soldier who is wearing a majestic, shiny, red shard plate, right? So this sort of mystic, almost supernatural armor, a red shard plate from head to toe. And Kaldin asks the old man if this is the king, right? The king's army, wherever they're going, whatever they're doing, is this the king walking across? And the old man chuckles and says, absolutely not. This is our high prince, right? So the high princes are serving the king, giving their soldiers to help the king fight the Parshendi, right? Who killed the king's father, King Gavilar. He says, we could only wish that this was the king. And if not the king, that would mean that we were not in High Prince Sadeas's camp. We would be in High Prince Dalinar's camp. And Kaldin asks, who is this High Prince Dalinar? And the old man lets him know that that's the king's uncle. So the brother of the king who was killed. And the old man goes on to say this. He says, Bright Lord Dalinar is the best of men, the most honorable shard bearer in the king's army. They say he has never broken his word. Well, Kaldin, we know how Kaldin feels about light-eyed people, right? He doesn't feel good about them. He scoffs at that remark. And, well, regardless, High Prince Sadeas marches past, and Kaldin makes some comment of, well, at least we made it, and now we can go back and regroup. Well, about that point, Gaz shouts out, lift! So they drag this bridge across the chasm to where they're now all around it. Lift! The men get back under their places. And Kaldin realizes, we're not going home, we're continuing on. And so as if confusion and exhaustion hit all at once, Kaldin just sort of zones out. And for the next dozen times of doing the same exact thing, marching the bridge, dropping it, pushing it over the chasm, the army and the cavalry and High Prince Thaddeus march across, they walk across, drag it across, pick it up and keep going. It is beyond terrible, right? And so after time and time and time of this, Kaldin is bloodied, he's bruised, he's exhausted, as are other men. He's the worst though, because he doesn't have any protection on himself. They finally get to another chasm and we hear the same commands: drop, push, walk, drag, lift. However, this time Gaz yells out a new command. The command, switch. Well, though Kaldin is delirious, this sort of brings him back to consciousness. When he looks around and he notices some anticipation spren. Now we know we've met a spren, the one that's been speaking to Kaldin. However, spren have different types and different expressions of spren. And whenever people feel strong emotions, actually spren, these little fairy-like creatures, they will sort of creep out of the ground. And if you're feeling extremely happy, maybe some joy spren will appear. If you're feeling fearful, if you're feeling angry. Well, Kaldin notices anticipation spren begin to emerge from the ground, which is not a good thing. Meaning a lot of people are feeling a lot of anticipation. Well, Gaz marches up to Kaldin and says, the newcomer gets the best position, your lordship. They were going back and forth about how Kaldin was in a High Lord's army before. He says, well, your lordship, I've got a special spot for you. He takes him from behind Bridge 4 and puts him right in the front row. Well, the only benefit that Kaldin notices is that no longer is his face covered by wood. Actually, there are openings in the front of the bridge, so though he has to lift, he can see where they're going. And Kaldin begins to wonder, well, I couldn't even done this beforehand, because at least I can see where we're running. It takes my mind off just nothing but the pain. Well, as they begin marching forward at pace, there are 20 other bridge crews and bridges, right, that are with him. Kaldin can sort of see them off to the left and right. They begin not just marching forward, but picking up their pace to where they're actually almost at a complete run. Kaldin looks forward in the distance and sees a row of soldiers, and it hits him. What's about to happen? Those soldiers ahead are not Alethi soldiers. They're not any soldiers from other countries of Roshar. Those are different creatures. Those are Parshendi. Those are the enemy that they've come to get vengeance against for killing King Gavilar. And he sees row after row of them. Some are kneeled, some are standing in their hands. He sees very strong, very powerful, very accurate short bows that these Parshendi have. And Kaldin realizes that they are not just marching, they're not just running, they are running headlong into oncoming arrows, wave after wave. There's one more chasm between them and the Parshendi. And these 20 bridges have to get the army across. And so they begin running. Kaldin, everything in him feels like he should be rushing the opposite direction. However, they charge, and arrow after arrow after arrow is peppering the wood all around Kaldin. Men next to him, the old man that he's sort of gotten to know, he gets hit by an arrow. People are dying, Every time they drop, the bridge is getting heavier and heavier. He can see off to the side, entire bridges are crashing to the ground because men are being wiped out underneath them. And it's as if everything is fading from consciousness. The pain, the anguish, the stress, the anticipation. All Kaldin remembers is at the very last moment, before he completely blacks out, they get to the chasm, they drop the bridge, they shove it with everything they have across, and as he is falling to the ground, he hears the thunder of cavalry rushing across to break the Parshendi line. And that's where we have a chapter break inside the same chapter. We're going to continue it in the next chapter, but that is where we end. Kaldin is unconscious. He has no idea what has just happened. However, pain, anguish, and these bridge crews are there for the purpose of getting High Prince Sadeas and the other High Prince's armies across the chasms to fight these Parshendi. Everything fades to darkness and Kaldin is left unconscious. We'll pick up the remainder of chapter 6 in the next video, but hope you enjoy it. Hope you were as shocked as I was going through this chapter. What an experience, what intensity we find, and what a story that we are reading. So thanks for watching. Let me know below how you feel about these bridge crews. What was your experience when you're reading this? What are the emotions that you're feeling? And we'll look forward to discussing later. Thanks so much for watching. Like and subscribe to the video for more Cosmere content, and we'll catch you on the next video.